That's very, very kind, and thank you, John, and William. I very much think that it's important, given the level of interest and the patience that this audience has shown so far, that we give you a chance to have your say briefly or ask questions. We also have on the panel, and they may wish to speak themselves separately, as well as Jan Faulkner, Anthony Powers, leader of the Sarganty group, and Patricia Morgan, Deputy Leader of the Council. So, and we have vast amounts of talent and knowledge in the room. Can I just say two things? One is quick interventions, please. The second is, if anyone wants more detail, there's some very helpful documents out there for display from William. And the third thing is that, can you please say who you are? I won't, I know many people in this room, but I'm not going to embarrass myself or you by not remembering your names, and my memory is fatally bad when I'm on the podium. So I'll call people, and please can they identify themselves when they say their piece. So, questions, ladies and gentlemen, to these extremely interesting proposals we've had. Yes, madam. Could you speak up?
Jane Adams, library user and friend of Hereford Record Office.
Thank you.
What are the indicative costs, capital and revenue? There must be some indication that the team has come up with.
What are the indicative costs, capital and revenue?
Well, the costs obviously depend on the design development, but at a rough guess at the moment, for the size of building that William's talking about, we're probably talking of something around just above £7 million. So there is that. And I can never remember how much the library's costs are run at the moment, but you've got to maintain that building, you've got to put the staff into it. But so there is a major point here, is that the building will not continue to run. It can't run on nothing, and the council will have, in my view, there's got to be some contribution from the council to the running of this library, and they've got to meet their statutory obligations anyway. I know they're in dire financial straits, but it will need some, there's a limit to how much you can raise commercially. The rest will have to come from council tax or some other sources.
So £7 million, and some of it will have to be met from public funds. Did you want to add anything to that, William, in terms of numbers?
Well, there's fitting out, obviously, of all of the different parts, isn't there? So there's a cost involved in that, and people would have to work that one through themselves. Yeah.
Right, so it's a large number. Sir.
Henry Connor, local resident and library user. How long would we be in temporary accommodation for the library, and would there be access to the local material for local studies during that time?
Well, I would think it would take, what, William, 3 or 4 years? 2 or 3 years. And so that's why you need a better temporary library than what we've got at the moment, and a bigger one, because then you can get more of the material.
Sorry, John. I mean, the actual construction could be done relatively quickly, couldn't it? It would be within 18 months or 2 years. But we're talking about a lead-in process and so on and so on.
I'm very concerned that people at the back can't hear.
Material.
Sorry?
The local studies material,
Yes.
which is so vital for local research.
Can we just hold up a second, sir? You're making a very important point, but can I just ask that people responding, and we'll try and go around the tables, to stand up and project, because I'm worried that folks at the back can't hear. Very important point made about not just the importance of the temporary library being able to last for possibly 3 or 4 years while, as it were, the work is done, but also the importance of local studies material being accessible during that period as well. Madam.
Valerie Hurrell. I'm a former employee of the Norwich Millennium Library. I moved to Hereford 7 years ago. The reason we had the forum was because there was a major fire in 1994, and we were in the temporary services from 95 to 2001, and we actually split the lending and all the other reference other aspects into 2 separate premises, because we couldn't find a building big enough to accommodate everything, and the floor loading as well. So that's something that could be considered.
Yes, that's a major point.
Good, that's very helpful. Can we go to the back of the room now for questions, madam? Gillian. Sorry. Could you speak up, Gillian? Sorry.
I'm concerned about the reference library and whether, if it's
very much to the point just raised by the lady here, so different functions of the library. Will there be, no, I think you're absolutely on target though, which is these different functions, maybe John, you could pick up that, how to handle the reference library and to respect the different functions.
I think the answer, to be absolutely honest, is with the moment we don't know, because obviously this is the next bit of work. I mean, it's crucial, and apart from the example of Norwich, I mean, I'm familiar with what happened in Cardiff, where actually they had a similar situation where they built a new library there. And there they managed to find a site where they put everything together. They were lucky it was there. But I doubt that you could do that in Hereford. There's not space or room, so I'm assuming that there would be some split of function. How you deal with the local collection, I'm not entirely sure, because there is an overlap here with what's going on down at Rotherwas, and that obviously has to be taken into account. It may well be that if there was space in Rotherwas, some of the reference library could go there. To my mind, that's far too far out the way. We need somewhere in the centre of the city.
Good, we're going to move round. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Peter Holiday, representing Leinster Library Users Group. But I am talking at the moment about Hereford because, of course, it is the central library. Very ambitious scheme, in my opinion, not ambitious enough. To put a museum and an art gallery on top of a library seems to me totally wrong. It's not going to be big enough for a county museum, and the resources you've already indicated, and look at this building holds resources. Is that going to be sufficient? And the art gallery, which often tends to get overlooked, I think, art is very important to our society, and this town, this city rather, ought to have its own art gallery, in my opinion. Shrewsbury's got one, Worcester's got one. Any decent county town has its own art gallery, and that applies, in my opinion, to museums. So although this is ambitious, I don't think it goes far enough, and I can't see how actually what expansion of the library is going to take place. I'm not at all sure about that, and at the moment the library is far too cramped and dark, and I can't see that that's going to be improved. And one last point, if I may, the foundations are very important to this building. I know because I've been in this building, and if I'm not mistaken, the foundations go over the city ditch. So it's caused already structural problems, which the asbestos is only the surface of the structural problems. So my opinion is that problems are going to arise from, I don't want to be negative, but problems are going to arise when you come to reconstruct the building. Last point, if I may.
Well,
great that you've mentioned Keith Ray, and I'm a great enthusiast of Keith Ray. Let's remember, this council made Keith Ray redundant a few years ago.
And it's hugely to his credit he's been able to forge an international reputation on the back of that and his own work.
Which he did, as a member of Herefordshire Council, which was a community job, and now that community job has been lost.
So the point is well taken, and we're very grateful to you. Can I just pick up a couple of things that you said? The first question is about whether or not, as a practical matter, it isn't shortchanging the art gallery or the museum to combine them with the library. John, maybe you could pick up that. And then the issue of the cost and building over the ditch, maybe we could ask William to pick that up. John.
Well, originally, Peter, we did actually, as John referred to it, we did have a much more ambitious plan.
Speak up, John.
I'm sorry, we did originally have a much more ambitious plan at the time when the Edgar Street Grid cattle market area was being developed, and we saw then a complex of buildings which would have been all these things. But that's faded, it's a mirage. I mean, we are now faced with an austerity regime. There is no way we can anticipate the possibility of any one of these three functions having a custom-built building for them, unless some amazingly generous donor comes along and does so. Yes, I would love to see a separate art gallery, but what we've done with our proposal is accept the fact at the moment this is the building we've got, and that we've got to work out somehow the best way of integrating all these functions in the most efficient fashion. William's plans, by the way, do double the floor space. So there's already a huge improvement on the present facility.
Thank you very much indeed. William, did you want to speak about cost?
Peter, the principle of trying to redevelop this site must embrace the practical issues of a building which is absolutely tight into the intricacies of the city and into the ground. So I've had experience of this, and there is an opportunity to utilise, as I say, what we already have in terms of existing external walls. So the thought of totally clearing the site and redeveloping it would be a nightmare. The archaeology costs alone would be millions. So we cannot do that, and then therefore that's a good reason to reuse the existing structure as best we can. And then by excellent engineering to minimise new supports down the middle of the building, away from the edges. I've done this before, I've worked with engineers on these very principles, so that there could, for example, be, say, 8 points of load going through the Saxon ditch, and those would have to be investigated, but it would be, say, 8 points only of disturbance. Do you see what I'm getting at? This is terribly important, because if we have grandiose ideas about a rebuild, we will never afford it. It will be twice the price. It will be 14 millions. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, before we come back to you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to ask Jan Faulkner to speak a little bit about the county dimension to the libraries that we've been discussing.
I'll just stand here. Wave at me if you can't hear. There are a few chairs at the front, actually, if anyone wants to move forward. It's rather a lot standing in the lobby.
You may have to project.
Yes, I'll try. Right. I'm Jan Faulkner. I'm chair of Ross Library Development Group at the moment. And I'm going to start with a warning. This is it. Reading books may change your life. Copies available. I'm going to speak to you briefly about the Joint Action for Herefordshire Libraries, which is JAL, a very ugly word, so I'll try not to use that. And at the moment, the chair of that is Eleanor Kelly. Right, now nationally, our public library service is in crisis, with almost 450 closing in the past 5 years, despite public libraries being a statutory right under the 1964 Act of Parliament. In the Herefordshire market towns, the library service has been under immense pressure for many years, but has survived thanks to dedicated and resourceful work by library staff and volunteers, supported by very active library user groups, harnessing the support of local people in the cause of library retention. Belmont Library, Leominster Friends of the Library, Ross Library Development Group, Ledbury Friends of the Library, as well as other volunteer libraries in Webley, Lentwoodin, Peterchurch, and 11 rural book schemes in Lewis Harold, for example, Garway, Fownhope, Credenhill. There are 11 of those too. Recent threats to close the market towns libraries were met with strong opposition by each library user group. Save Our Libraries, there were 2 petitions from Leominster and from Ross, which between them generated almost 11,000 signatures, and those 2 petitions, which we presented to the leader of Herefordshire Council recently. In fact, I think 11,000 signatures is pretty amazing. We've got a population of about 186,000, and there were only about 1,950 responses to the county-wide paper asking everyone what they wanted to do about the cuts. So that was about 1,900 people, and yet we got 11,000 signatures, which I think shows the strength of people's feeling about their libraries. Well, we've heard, yes. Strong opposition shown by Herefordshire residents and visitors and tourists. They are a vital part of the economic lifeblood of our county. They use our libraries extensively for information, maps, guidebooks and computer use. Anyhow, moving on, it had become clear that it was time for the library user groups to start working together to help support the library service throughout Herefordshire, as every library in the county, from the smallest volunteer-led ones to the largest, Broad Street, as you know, currently closed through asbestos, is interdependent. Think Interchange of Books as just one example. Thus, Joint Action for Herefordshire Libraries was formed as an action group with representatives from each library user group to formulate and agree realistic plans to ensure a comprehensive and efficient library service for this and for the next generation, and to work with Herefordshire Council Cabinet to achieve this. JAL will fight the corner for every library user in Herefordshire. Libraries equal so much more than merely shelves of books. They provide vital access for all ages to literacy, information, knowledge, community and culture, and they are key contributors in the mix of local health and well-being, including that of mental health. Libraries are designated safe places, that's with a capital S and P. Libraries are used also by families who choose elective home education for their children, as no funding is available for that, and libraries offer extensive backup and such things as being able to borrow a much larger number of items and for a longer period of time. Sorry? Yeah, okay. Sorry, there are in fact 110 such families in Herefordshire and about 200 more who aren't declared. Library-based computers are used extensively by those who don't have IT access and for those whose access is limited. In North Herefordshire, personal computer ownership is among the lowest in the country. The Office for National Statistics produced figures last autumn which show that 70 to 75% of people access the internet probably daily, but that means that 1 in 4 people do not. And we are an ageing county, in fact higher than the national average figure. But make no mistake, yes. Right.
Another sentence if you would, and then we're going to...
Okay, right, okay. Right, well, anyhow, then make no mistake, libraries in the 21st century are about much more than books, as John has said. What will JAL do? It intends to champion the library cause in the year ahead and beyond.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Madam, yes, sir.
Yes. I'm not responding to Jan, but to comments made by John. Sorry, my name's Miriam Griffiths. About overlap between services, and I think Peter about is this ambitious enough? And my key word is strategy. And I'm wondering how this development, visionary, innovative, full of good ideas, full of energy, great, thank you, how does it fit with the strategy for our cultural services? And if you get into your helicopter and you go up just a little way, you can look down not only on the library building and Broad Street, but let's say museum service, which has been mentioned, and you start to see that whilst this could offer something for our museum service, it is not the big solution. It could pick up a strand of what a museum service is all about and afford and furnish a bit of something for a museum. It isn't the solution for the future of the museum service. That doesn't mean it's not to be welcomed. And if you take your helicopter a bit further up and you look down and you look at the county's cultural strategy for heritage and cultural services, how does this fit? Because unless you see how it fits, the risk is that this gets overloaded with a bunch of expectations that it cannot fulfill. So yes, be more ambitious, but at the same time manage expectation and think, what is the real county-wide cultural strategy as a vehicle to take this kind of thing forward in partnership with other projects?
Well, thank you very much indeed for that question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to abuse the prerogative of the chair now by inviting either Patricia or Anthony or both to comment on that question of leadership and vision, which I think is so important. Could I just add one thought from the chair, which is, and I hadn't understood this until I went round this building this afternoon in the brilliant hands of Judy, but actually, two things. One is, there is no final end point that represents a perfect state. It's an evolving entity and it always will evolve, and we have to make the best of it, and it became clear that. The second is that actually the county's been remarkably successful over the years in finding buildings that are suitable to its needs. It did it in 1875, it did it with this building, it's done it brilliantly with the new archive building down in on Rotherwas, and which, by the way, runs itself on a very small gas boiler, as you may know, the size you might find in a small house, such as its eco-brilliance. So I think there is every reason to be excited about the trajectory. We've just tried to take the next step in that conversation. Now, Patricia, would you, I don't know if it's not your brief particularly, but would you like to say a few things on this?
I'm very happy. Yes, well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's all credit to you that there are so many people here to talk about libraries and other cultural services. I very much see it that Herefordshire Council is here very much to support the community, to support the library groups, to support the cultural services, to support the courtyard in developing that theme that we want in Herefordshire for our cultural services. I think what we've heard today, the 21st century library sounds absolutely fantastic. There's clearly a huge amount of work that's done in it. It's been done in a really, really short space of time. So all credit to Johns and William. We've had some extremely exciting ideas, and certainly we are hearing fantastic enthusiasm, and these are really important in terms of going forwards with libraries. The decision that Cabinet made in December, that was very much about working with the community to look at our libraries in particular, but to come up with a really innovative solution as how we provide these services in the future. There is no perfect solution. I think, as Jessie says, there is no end point. This is evolving, and I think all credit to you all here for all the work that's been done. And I very much look forward to seeing where we get to.
Thank you for that. Anthony, did you want to add anything to that, Anthony Powers?
Thank you, Jessie. Yes, this isn't an occasion for party politics or anything of that sort, but I would quickly like to point out that A, to my awareness, there is no such strategy as you have asked about, and B, that in the budget, which is going to be agreed next week, the budget for cultural services is going to be lost at a stroke next year, 863,000 out of that. There is some delay in the implementation of the proposed cuts to libraries and museums, but the cultural services, that just goes. What I really wish for, and I have said at many occasions at council meetings, is for the local authority, yes, to recognise its statutory role in relation to the Libraries and Museums Act, but possibly even more important, to recognise that every aspect of cultural services, libraries and museums is a massive contributor to the economic well-being of the local county and population, the social, educational and health and well-being. It is not a matter of subsidy, it is a matter of investment on which the returns are such that any businessman or woman would bite one's hand off for. The critical importance of the local authority funding these things to however minimal a degree it feels capable of is that allows organisations to access so many other funding streams, and without that evidence of local support they cannot, and in terms of the other supporters, quite rightly are not able to access funding unless there's evidence of local support. The second point on that is that once that funding and investment has been made, the return to local economies, and Malvern is a spectacular example of this, is shown by well-evidenced research and studies, in this case from the University of Warwick Department of Economics, to be a gearing back to the local economy of anything between 25 and 40 pounds to every £1 invested. Malvern is 40. Now, we are not recognising that and not maximising that opportunity. So there needs to be a change in thinking that it's called cultural services. Yes, it is a service, but it's more than that. And it's not a question of subsidising or giving grants. It is a copper-bottomed investment.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you, for that.